Good afternoon. Welcome to our weekly Tuesday webinar. I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter Schools Association. I'm joined today by David Frank, Executive Director of the Charter Schools Office at NYSID, Kathryn Connell-Espinosa from SUNY Charter Schools Institute, standing in today for Susie, Erin Cochran and Laurie Hazeley from New York City DOE, and Corey Callahan from New York City Charter Center. As usual, we'll start with a few updates from the association before handing it over to David, Kathryn, and Laurie, and then fielding a few questions. And we'll start with the open meetings law, which is due to expire. The executive order which extends the authorization to have remote meetings will expire on 12/3. It has not been extended yet. We do expect to see an updated executive order with the extension tomorrow or Wednesday, as is the custom. Absentee ballots are still being counted in New York State, but the New York State Senate has reached a supermajority with at least 42 seats in the next legislative session, which will start in January, 42, 43, and counting. Here at NYCSA, we are formulating advocacy plans for next year. We'll be seeking input from all of you, so look for those communications in your inbox later this month. As you likely saw, Mayor de Blasio announced elementary students will return to full-time in-person instruction beginning December 7th. I'm sure Laurie and Erin and Corey will update us more on any implication that has for charters in New York City. Governor Cuomo has announced changes to the requirements for schools in red and orange zones this week. Schools will have to conduct weekly testing. Schools in red zones will have to test 30% of their in-person students, faculty, and staff over the course of a month. Schools in the orange zones will have to test 20% of their in-person population over the course of a month. At the same time the governor was announcing these changes, New York State Department of Health was holding a call to update school groups. And so at the time, the details on the changes the governor's announcement would have on the test requirements had not been released, or at least New York State DOH wasn't prepared to talk about them. So questions on the changes have been submitted to New York State DOH. As soon as they're available to us, we will share. In his conference call today, Governor Cuomo discussed vaccines, noting he sent a letter questioning the current federal administration's plan to roll out vaccines, particularly their impact on Black, brown, poor, and immigrant communities. Vaccines, as you know, will be the next major initiative that will impact schools. I have started some discussions with school leaders about vaccines to get samplings of thoughts on important issues to consider. I will continue that outreach, as well as, and I intend to have a large group meeting so we can start to have larger conversations on the impact of these plans, be a part of the conversation as they're developed, and so that we're prepared when they roll out. Please look for my email if you want to reach out to me, discuss. In the meantime, please feel free to email me as well. Finally, the New York Charter School Parent Council is hosting advocacy boot camp sessions for parents. This 6-session course is intended to educate and empower parents to advocate for their children's education and their right to choose the best school for their children. It's not too late for parents to join the current classes. Please share the link we're going to drop in the chat. Parents are powerful advocates and an important voice for the fight for great schools. All right, so now with all that, I will turn it over to David, Kathryn, and Laurie for their updates. Then we'll field questions in the Q&A and hand it off to Corey and Erin for New York City specific updates. David, Kathryn, and Laurie, welcome. Any updates from your team? We'll start with you, David.
Oh, are we going to say I nominate Kathryn since she's our special guest? Well, first, it is good to see everyone. And Kathryn, I aspire to have a exposed brick wall in my house one of these days. So it's good to see everyone on this Thursday. You know, it is the number of COVID cases in our state are unfortunately far too high, but there is light at the tunnel, and the work that you're doing with your students is critically important to ensure that that this academic year does not go to waste. And so it's heartening to see all of those reopening plans being implemented as we work with our schools, particularly our renewal schools, to go on site visits and get into classrooms, albeit remote, to see that work. So you know, keep up the tremendous effort in face of this adversity. I also want to thank the 278 charter schools that successfully submitted ESSA fiscal transparency information to us at State Ed. I particularly want to thank my colleague, Janet Klein, who helped facilitate that work from the State Ed department, but also the finance team at SUNY, who I can't have enough good things to say about, and particularly Barb Ackenauer and Connor LeClaire. Those schools who did not submit yet, you know who you are, and your authorizer will be in touch. I know some schools did ask for an extension, and we appreciate you being proactive and asking for that extension prior to the deadline. That's an important way to manage up. But thank you very much to all of those schools. And lastly, I do want to thank the State Association for helping to facilitate our office hours. It's definitely a strategy that I think was successful, and we're going to take this State Association up on helping to facilitate more conversations and opportunities for technical assistance. It's part of the work that we want to shift our focus towards as an authorizer, and so we appreciate the partnership. Otherwise, for Board of Regents authorized charter schools, you have but 15 days. December 15th is the deadline for to submit revision requests through our SCD portal. And actually, Anna, that might be a good area for some office hours, actually, now that I think about it.
Happy to do it.
So I'll be in touch. And so please, if you are a Board of Regents authorized charter school and you're thinking about a revision, feel free to go to our website. I will put the link in the chat. There's actually, oops, there it goes. There's a video on revisions. There's guidance. So take a look, December 15th. And that's all I have. So I'll hand it over to my colleagues.
Thanks, David. I'm happy to jump in here. It's always a pleasure to join this great company. So we don't have a ton of updates from the SUNY Charter Schools Institute. We have heard from schools many questions on how new school protocols are impacting charters, and we're still working through those and trying to get that information out to folks. Some of what we do know is that it's our understanding that if a New York City DOE building is open, that the charter schools may also be open in that space regardless of grade. Charters in co-located space are supposed to contact the DOE within at least 3 days lead time to indicate whether they will reopen on December 7th. So please be sure to communicate that. We've heard from schools about the timeline regarding the pre-K RFP and believe that release may be pushed back, but not certain on the new date for that. And then, as David mentioned, the ESSA financial transparency reporting was due yesterday, and a huge shout out to everybody that has either started the process or completely completed the submission. For SUNY schools, if I was a betting person, I would guess that you have probably already heard from Connor or Barb, but if you have not, you will. They will be reaching out to folks to check in on that. So just want to make sure that those get in as soon as possible. And that is it from the SUNY side. So thank you, everybody.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I want to echo David's sentiments and say stay strong through all of this. I'm fresh off of a renewal visit today and yesterday and remain inspired by the work that you all are doing. And beyond that, I do not have any updates at this time.
And potentially due to the Thanksgiving holiday, which I hope was restful for everyone, we didn't receive questions in advance. And from what I'm seeing in the Q&A, the vast majority, if not all, and I'm just going to do a quick rescan, are New York City questions. I think before I hand it over to Corey and Aaron, I would only just say that the parameters and the conditions under which geographies are turning colors, and I don't mean the colors of fall leaves, although they are the same colors, and the requirements associated with them are in flux. And so please be on the lookout for updates from us. You can also, and I'll drop the link in the chat, the governor's the governor's website has good information about both of those things, although I would flag that the information, the details on that website tends to lag any announcements about it by as much as 24 hours. And so oftentimes what we're seeing is that the governor makes an announcement, has a press conference, has a conference call which we participate in, and there is information about a change, and then the details like the map for the color zones or the different requirements or the for schools in particular comes out as much as 24 hours later. So I would just flag for folks, I think that this is going to continue to evolve. And so be on the lookout for updates. And so with that, I will turn it over to Aaron and Corey.
Great, thanks, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I see a lot of questions, and I've gotten a lot of questions over the weekend and early this week. So we will start. Thank you, Aaron, for joining. I know you are already answering questions in the chat to try and get folks the info they all need. But I think let's start. We'll just start at the beginning and try and work our way through because there is a lot here. So we'll start with, you know, the mayor's announcement was that buildings with 3K to 5th grade buildings are going to open for DOE as well as District 75. Aaron, can you talk about what that means for charter schools who are co-located and also want to open? And I would say for charter schools that offer any grade, what are the parameters of what schools should do if they also would like to reopen next week?
Sure, thanks, Corey. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a great afternoon. So charter schools in DOE space, regardless of which grade they serve and regardless of which grade the district schools serve, can reopen on Monday. So one thing to note, yes, so very exciting. So one thing to note is that we will be sharing a survey in the Charter School Weekly. I am sure all of you are just very tired of filling out forms and surveys. I apologize for asking you to fill out one more, but we really, really do need to confirm who is planning to reopen next week. We know a lot of charter schools that have sightings in DOE space may now be planning to serve students as soon as Monday. We know that there are charter schools that have private sites have linked your calendars to the decisions that the DOE is making. And so now maybe you are choosing to open on Monday. So there are just a lot of moving pieces here. So we're asking that everyone, regardless of whether you have already told us things, just take a second, fill out that survey, and we're asking that you return it by noon tomorrow. That would be amazingly helpful, especially if you are in a DOE space that currently the district school in that space is not going to be reopening on Monday. It's going to be crucial so that we can ensure that you have all of the services that you need to reopen when you plan to serve students. And then I would just echo and reinforce that to please update your OPT calendars because there is a 3-day delay between service being turned on if you have turned it off and you're planning to open Monday.
And so then before we go back into more questions about DOE, I just want to adjust charters in private space. And Aaron, please add anything if I'm missing it. But for charters in private space, nothing has changed, right? If you are open, you're open. If you have decided to close or be remote, that is your choice. You still have access to services. This is from a few weeks ago when the DOE first closed. All of that was worked out. So just want schools to know that if you're in private space, none of the new DOE reopening plans really impact you. And just Erin, correct me if I'm missing anything, but I think that is still
No.
well.
Yeah, that's 100% right. We just know that there are some charter schools that have private sites that may have decided to follow the DOE in closing. And so now you may be looking to reopen along the same timeline. And so we're just asking that every single charter school in the city kind of take a pause and just make sure that we know what your plans are so that we can support you in getting those services.
Great. So the next thing we should talk about is the testing requirements. And I just want to say again, as I think you all recall, back when DOE opened in September, DOE also had different testing requirements for their own schools, which was the 20% random testing monthly. So now with DOE reopening next week, they're instituting an every week 20% testing program. So Erin, the question is this program, are charter schools required to comply with this program?
No, charter schools and co-located space are not required to match that 20% weekly testing requirement. And this is beyond anything related to any particular zones that your building may be in. This is the DOE requirement. So no, charter schools do not need to follow that.
Yeah, so I think that is, I know we've gotten a lot of questions on that recently from schools. So again, schools are required to follow the state zones, which are yellow. And I think there's only one group of orange right now in Staten Island, though, as Anna says, things will be updated. So you have to watch the zones. But right now, schools are in yellow. And for most of you, if you have been open, there's a new protocol in place if you are a yellow zone, which requires that you only have to do the 20% over a 2-week period. And then as long as your positivity rate is lower than your zip code, you actually are not, you don't have to continue doing that, meeting those testing requirements. So I know I've gotten some emails from schools even this week saying that they are going to actually be able to test out of the testing requirement. So again, for schools in private space or co-located space, really your responsibilities is making sure that you know if you're in the yellow or the orange zone. I know Erin emailed a whole group of new folks when they got yellow zoned a couple weeks ago. If you're not sure who you are, you can always check on the link either to the city site or the state site to see if you're in yellow zone. But right now, the testing requirements of the 20% weekly DOE are not required by you. Now, I know the other question that schools want is, what if schools, Erin, would like to be part of the DOE's every week 20% testing program? Can they be?
No, not at this time. DOE is not conducting testing for charter schools.
Okay. So those were some of the big ones. I'll start going through some of the ones in the chat, the Q&A. So are charter schools able to use the DOE testing capability? So no, this is, as of right now, I think Erin just answered that. In terms of how the 20% are calculated, I don't know, Erin, if you have any more details of what DOE is going to be doing. I haven't seen those details emerge. I know that, that's probably forthcoming. If you are a charter school that is choosing to try and match the DOE and just do the 20%, which you're entitled to do, I don't know, Erin, if you have any more details to share on that.
No, I don't. But if we get them, we might share them as an FYI. So I will look for that.
Then in terms of, is the DOE providing testing? No, but is there a list of companies we can use? There is definitely a list. Folks on here, we have a Google Doc. I can make sure to put in a second once I stop reading the chat, or if other folks on the chat have access to the Google Doc and you want to share it for me, please go ahead. Another question, Erin. How will New York City charter schools be impacted by the legal challenges of the Catholic schools and the DOE in terms of providing testing to students and staff?
We're watching that currently.
Conversation.
Yes. So we are watching that, but currently the DOE is not providing testing for charter schools.
And I would just add, so that folks understand, it's not that the DOE is not providing it for charters specifically, it is that they are still not providing it for the non-public schools as well. So the lawsuit is still being worked out. I think there was a win, which we are hopefully watching will turn into action. But as of right now, there are no updates. We're very closely staying on top of the situation. We'll keep the sector posted, but just so everyone knows, that's the status right now. A question about what if there's a protocol for students who show up without a COVID test? So again, I think we've gone around every charter school, including those in co-located space, gets to set their own standards about testing. I know that the DOE's newest communication to families is that you need to have a consent filled out so that students can be tested. Charter schools are, allowed to also have that as a policy if they want to make it so students have to be tested in order to remain in person or in hybrid instruction. But again, that is up to your own schools to make determinations about how you're going to use testing. And again, I see another question about the on-site, which again is not being the fact that DOE is testing every single school that is open with the 20% every week, regardless of zone, again, is just the DOE's current policy. Erin, I don't know if you know this, but do you know if pre-K and K are exempt from the testing that the DOE is going to be doing? I assume that's what the question is asking.
Yeah, I seem to recall that it is for grade 1 and up, but I don't know if that means that pre-K and K are excluded. So I will also look into that.
I can take the next one about the Catholic school lawsuit. To Tim's point, yes, to the extent the ruling gets implemented, I would say my opinion is that because charter schools are considered non-public under the Charter Schools Act for purposes of health under education law, Section 912, what is given out to non-public schools would also be given out to charter schools. And that is why I say we are all watching this very carefully, and we'll see what comes of it. Should charters use the DOE consent form? I would say, and Erin, feel free to add to it if you want, you're allowed to, but remember, that's the template that goes through the DOE portal, if I'm not correct, Erin. So if you need testing consent for your own students, you can still use the same language, but you should be making sure it gets channeled to you. I don't know, Erin, if you have any updates to that.
No, that's right.
So another question about the Catholic schools. Yeah, so again, at this point, given how the Catholic case went, we are still waiting. There's not necessarily another petition that has to happen, but we will keep you informed if there is such an action needed. But right now, we're still waiting for updates. Thank you, Sandy, for putting in the charter office document of vendors. So in terms of the difference is schools go from yellow to orange zone in testing requirements. I believe Yumika mentioned them at the beginning of the call. I will say that we are going to have our bi-weekly call on Friday with the Department of Health, New York City, and DOE. Invite will be going out shortly, and I can place the link in the chat. But there has been a change in terms of what the testing requirements are if you go from yellow to orange. Just briefly, I believe you have to test 20% over the month if you were orange, whereas before, as you may recall, it was a bit more restrictive in terms of reopening. So definitely more changes to come. I have yet to see an official, as Yumika mentioned, the training they last did had not been able to incorporate the actual changes for it, but I anticipate that there will be another memo soon in terms of how any more details. And then of course, all of you know that you can ask questions of the New York City DOH, and Erin, maybe you could provide the NP email address again in the chat for folks, because I know schools have been using that a lot to ask questions about orange and yellow zones, particularly if you're not getting answers from the state address, which I know folks sometimes are not getting the answers there.
Sure, let me pull that up.
Yeah, Julie's asking the yellow zone designation. Correct me if I'm wrong, Erin or anyone else, but I believe it's 2.5% is yellow zone by state data.
But that's one of the things that's changing.
So it's going to be higher?
It's going to factor in other factors. Sorry, Yumika, go ahead.
That's okay. So for the yellow zone, the clusters, all the microclusters, but the yellow zone in particular varies based on area. And for orange zone and red zone, the testing requirements are 30% for red and 20% for orange, but the criteria is, I'll just say, complicated. So I'm going to drop a link into the chat where you can see what it is without me going through a 20-minute dissertation.
Joy is asking, who do you inform when your positivity rate is lower? That is a great question to ask the state DOH. I think that my hope is that they will update their form, which is generally what they do, is as things happen. So as this Friday comes about, and there might be schools that are in a position where they could have opted out, I believe, for the first time, there should hopefully be a box that you can check. But I would always say, and I've said this to schools, like, make sure that you email that State Department of Health email address to say, if there's not something obvious when you do your reporting at the end of this week, but let them know that the reason you're not reporting is because here's your positivity rate and here is what your C was. Testing exemptions for students with disability. That is a good question for Friday, Julie, unless someone else on this call has specifics about testing exemptions for students with disabilities regarding COVID. And then, yeah, Yumika, I think you just dropped the chat in there about the testing requirements for private located charter in yellow, orange, or you should follow that link. And changes have come, and we will discuss all of those on Friday. If you have more questions, you should submit those in advance. And with that, I will make sure to drop in the chat the registration link for Friday's call so that you can all register. Erin, anything else that I am missing that you would want to update folks on?
No, just a reminder to please take that survey that we will send out in the Charter Schools Weekly tonight. It's going to be extremely helpful to ensure that you're getting the services that you need for your students if you are reopening or if you are continuing to serve students in person. So there we go.
Before we wrap,
nothing else?
Yeah, before we wrap, David, there was a question in the Q&A that I think you may have been typing an answer to while I was typing a note to you. But could you speak to the question that a couple of folks raised about the memo that came from you and your office earlier today?
Sure. So there was a memo that went out from the State Ed Department regarding attendance. And actually, I was not even copied on the distribution. So that it actually went out is you guys are giving me news. But I did sign on to the memo and saw it. And that's why, Wendy, I thought it was 6 pages, not 9, but I could be wrong. But basically, it's primarily guidance to school districts on attendance collection requirements for this academic year. And the bottom line really is that your level 1 center, your regional information center, will be modifying their systems to collect data regarding attendance that complies with these SED guidelines. So so in terms of steps that you need to take, really what you need to know is you need to ensure that when you're collecting attendance, that you know who's in person, who is attending via synchronous instruction remotely, and who's participating via asynchronous instruction remotely. And so as long as you're keeping those records, you should have all of the information that you need to comply with the requirements that we're putting on your regional information center. But there will be more information forthcoming from the department. I don't have the link right now, Dawn. We will get it and we will put it up on our website. We actually, on the SED website, on the Charter School Office website, we have a link to all of the pertinent memos that go out from the department. And I will put a link to that in the chat. And once I have a link, once we prepare a link, we will put it on that website. So more information to come, but basically, you know, if I had to boil down that memo to one takeaway, it's just keep track of, one, what's in your reopening plan and your charter. But two, make sure that as you're collecting attendance, you know who's in person, who's synchronous, and who's asynchronous. Those are the big takeaways for charter schools. The regional information centers have a lot more work to do on the back end, but most of that stuff does not apply to charter schools.
Awesome, David. Thank you so much.
No problem.
David and Anna, can I just add something quickly?
Please.
For all of those wonderful charters who are about to reach out to Eastern Suffolk BOCES and ask what the implications are for reporting, they are working on it. So just hold tight, collect internally, and we will definitely be in touch as Eastern Suffolk BOCES retools their attendance collection.
Awesome. Erin, if I could kick you one more question, or Corey, you can, because Tim asked sort of two subsequent questions in the Q&A, and his second really clarifies the first. So Tim, there have not been any updates from the State Department of Health since their update in August to their July memo about reopening guidance. But it sounds like really what your question is about the mayor's announcement and the implication for spacing. So on that, Erin, I would be curious if you had any thoughts.
No, nothing new to add there. I know that folks are looking into seeing whether students in certain buildings can be served more frequently. So we will share more as any of the policies or requirements are changing.
I would just add, I think that the comments that were made, this is from my perspective, were meant for zip codes where there were very low hybrid participation. I think there are perhaps some schools in DOE that were not getting a lot of participation, and so there is maybe an opportunity to increase the number of day offerings for students. But I know that there are plenty of schools where that is not going to be possible in the DOE world. And as Erin has mentioned, there are no changes to the social distancing requirements. So I don't think it is going to be, unless something else happens, I don't think it is going to be an across the board change that the district is able to offer 5 days a week to every New York City DOE student going to school.
Yeah, that's my current understanding, Corey.
Okay, it looks like we've covered all the questions, covered all our content. Before we wrap up, I just want to give a chance for everyone here, all our panelists and authorizers, to raise your hands if you have any final comments. Other than that, we're going to wrap. All right, we're all wrapped. Be well. We'll see you next time.
Hi, everyone. Stay safe. Happy belated Thanksgiving.